My talk is titled Stardust and Stellar Consciousness, which is a talk I've been giving for a year or two based on my book, Son of God. But I've also been working on a new talk for this year. I didn't think I'd have it ready when Lucy invited me to give a talk at her premiere edition of the Eternal Knowledge Festival. But I have got a new talk, so I'm going to premiere it today, but lest the Trades Descriptions Act people send me a nasty letter, I'm going to give you a 5-minute condensation of stardust and stellar consciousness. So, really quick, you'll have to put some of this together yourself as I go, but the default mode for humanity was always to recognize our sun as an entity with divine status. And it didn't matter what continent you went to, what century you picked, what culture, this was it. The Greeks, the Mayans, the Egyptians, the Celts, everybody knew this, and it was when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, that's when a stop was put to this silly idea. But it wasn't science that made us think sun worship was primitive or ignorant. It was the church that absolutely burned that into our culture. They took a dim view of sun worship, as we know. So unlike the ancients, we now view the sun as just a dead ball of gas up there that happens to provide us with the light of life. But science has a lot to say about the sun, and when you look at the scientific information on the sun, it underscores what the ancients felt about the sun. So unlike the ancients, we know that the sun and other stars turn hydrogen and helium gas into all the elements of the periodic table that enable us and this world to be here. So they're creating matter out of those simple ingredients. Unlike the ancients, we know about the sun's key role in photosynthesis, how sunlight takes water and air and turns them into the entire vegetable world, which is a pretty amazing phenomenon. We also know that the very energy of our life is recycled starlight, which has been condensed in plants, and that is re-released in us as life. So is it really that strange to think that the source of the materials and the energy of life might know life itself? We also know the sun's a really complex ball of hot gas. It's got 7 distinct layers to it. They're all providing very different functions within the sun, and there's a hive of electromagnetic activity going on the surface and within the sun. We also know, because there's 4 or more satellites looking at the sun now, that these enigmatic features of the sun, the sunspots, solar flares, coronal filaments, and coronal mass ejections, scientists say well, first of all, they are all highly synchronized. It's a coordinated activity going on, and scientists maintain, or they suggest, that the sun's corona is responsible for these, the sun's corona being the electromagnetic field of the sun that takes up more space than the sun itself. So they say the corona is responsible for these features. When you ask them to tell you about the corona, they say the corona is the most mysterious feature of the sun itself. And it's curious that if you talk to scientists about consciousness and mind, in us, they say it's the most mysterious feature of the human condition. So you can put 2 and 2 together, but I suspect that the corona of the sun is its mind field. We also know NASA discovered 4 years ago a magnetic portal that connects the Earth's electromagnetic field to the sun's corona. It's the diameter of the Earth, and it's a connection that joins up every 8 minutes. And I've got his slides here, don't I? Excuse me. These are all those people that used to worship the sun in different cultures, and I'll just use my hands. There's the sun. That's the 7 different layers of the sun. And these are the magnetic portals. Okay, so we're online with pictures now. So yeah. Now, does that sound like a dumb ball of gas just acting according to gravity and known physical principles? I don't know why the scientists don't get it, probably because they'd lose their jobs if they did. We also know that all stars The ancients didn't even know that our sun, most of them didn't know that our sun was another star, or that stars were like our sun. But we do, and we know that stars each have their own individual, astronomers use the term song, this sort of signal that they send out. And they live in communities, stars do, called clusters of hundreds, thousands, or around 10 million or more stars. And like we live in villages, towns, and cities. And within the clusters, they live as couples, as these romantic astronomers call it a binary system. But it's two stars that orbit around each other as they travel through the galaxy, sometimes exchanging gases in the process, I'm told. So they're also, stars are connected to each other by electromagnetic fields. Throughout the galaxy, these stars are hooked up to each other by electromagnetic fields. And it seems that, I would suspect there's function to these. It's not some accidental thing going on. And if scientists were to abandon their long-standing taboo against considering consciousness to exist in anything besides human beings, and some now say dolphins and orangutans too, but if they looked into the consciousness of living stars, they would perhaps not need these curious fixes like dark matter to try and explain why a galaxy holds together like it might be a conscious living organism. So they've had to come up with, well, 95% of it is this stuff that we cannot see. We can see through it. We can't detect it with all our high-tech equipment. But this explains why dumb, dead matter, acting according to nothing but natural principles, behaves the way that it does. And you see them all hooked together with electromagnetic fields. Maybe the reason galaxies hold together is because they are not stupid. And, leaving the science for a moment, when kids draw a sun, they always put the smiling face on it because the sun makes us smile. I'm not keeping up with these slides, am I? Yeah, a nice sunny day puts a smile on your face. And why is that? You can go into a really hot room, switch the lights on. It's not going to put a smile on your face like sunshine does. It's the original good vibration. Nearly over. So we are recycled stardust powered by recycled starlight. And we should really incorporate this into our spiritual consciousness. And recognition of stellar consciousness really changes everything. And I wrote a book about it. It's the only one that's out there. And that's my 1-hour lecture condensed to 5-6 minutes. Okay. That away. Okay, well, the new talk is titled Seeing the Light Through Ancient Eyes. And we're all familiar with Churchill's famous quotation, the history is written by the victors. Well, history is also destroyed by the victors. And an awful lot of knowledge is destroyed by victors at the same time. When the Library of Alexandria was burned down, when the House of Wisdom in Baghdad was destroyed by the Mongols in 1258, we lost a lot of knowledge, which is why we have to have conferences like this to try and rebuild on the scraps of it using our own minds to regain this lost knowledge. Today I'll begin by looking at two major historical figures who had a lot of their history lost before Christianity came along, and yet they seem to have had quite an influence on the template of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And, oh, thank you. And both of these men can lay claim to introducing the first supreme God to our culture. And it was the first God that was ethical, had goodness associated with it, and particularly light. And before this and after, most gods had a character, they had a story, images of them, and lots of priests taking care of the interface with them. And the two men I'm speaking about, let me move are Akhenaten in Egypt and Zoroaster in Persia. And this is not an actual picture of Zoroaster. There are none. His history was wiped out, as I say, but that's an impression of what he might have looked like. We'll talk about these, and then we'll look at light today through their ancient eyes. And Akhenaten's wife and son, Nefertiti and Tutankhamun, are much better known to us than him because a lot of his history was forgotten, destroyed, ignored, because when he died, the religious establishment sort of regained, they erased a lot of his legacy. But he was major significance in the 18th dynasty, 14th century BC, and in his very short 17-year rule, he turned Egypt upside down, he changed the religion, he moved the capital city, and he changed the art and culture. Zoroaster founded the religion that bears his name, Zoroastrianism, and exists to this day, had his history, his personal history, wiped out by several waves of invaders and conquest. But he put his teachings and some of his history, without the dates unfortunately, into the hymns, the gathas, which have been recited and kept true to this day. But Plutarch and some other Greek scholars place him before 6000 BC. More modern scholars are putting him within 2000 BC, but we don't really, Plutarch was closer to his time. And the unique vision both these men shared was the recognition of light itself as the ultimate deity, the ultimate God. And they recognized it as a self-created God that was the source for everything else that followed, life included. And they acknowledged this God to be beyond human description or comprehension, and beyond depiction in any images or statues. And they both recognized our sun to be a physical manifestation, the local rep of God, if you like. But they didn't have a God of light. Light was God. So, there's an illustration here. This is the symbol for Aten, the light god of Akhenaten. And they'd never had anything like this in Egypt. Well, you had statues, and they had to be looked after, and there was a lot of god tending going on by the priests. This was not Aten. This was just, it was clear it wasn't Aten. This was a representation of Aten. Of course, a lot of priests did lose or ended up out of work as a result because he replaced the other gods, which we'll get to. The Zoroastrians also made no physical representation of Ahura Mazda, the god of light of Zoroaster. There's no image to symbolize him, and even his name is not really, Ahura Mazda means light wisdom. So it's not really a name, it's a description. And in fact, they have 101 names for Ahura Mazda. And there's just a little selection of them here, but without beginning, without end, all privé. It's nice little, and that's just 21 of 101 names for Ahura Mazda. And the Zoroastrians also believed that fire was a representative of the divine God, as well as the sun, which it is. It's recycled sunlight when you burn wood. Akhenaten did not realize this, so fire worship wasn't part of his religion. But there were two other major differences between the two, and because Zoroastrianism was dualistic. It was the first religion to have sort of good and the force of bad or darkness, and this was their Ahriman, was like the bad force, which arose from lies and all the darkness and negativity that follows from lies. Originally, they saw it as the lamentable absence of good mind, but now it's more of a devil character. It's evolved. And Akhenaten had no I mean, that's obviously the dualistic good-bad that then came through to I mentioned that to Christianity. Akhenaten had no counterpoint to light. The light of, there's the fire worship. So they keep these fires burning for 1,000, 2,000 years. And it's like a sacred being. People and Zoroastrians go visit it. Where are we? Okay. Yeah, so Akhenaten had no counterpoint. The light was everything, the light of Aten. All other gods were banned from the scenes. Their names were chipped out of monuments. So he really tried to obscure all other deities. There was a little bit of grace for the moon god, but that was it. And he even banned the use of the plural word gods. So you couldn't thank the gods anymore when things were going well. And it was, the first thou shalt only worship me kind of stuff that came in with Akhenaten. So Zoroaster, there we go. He recognized light as God, of course, but this God was beyond jealousy and stuff like that. And there were six other lesser deities, these elemental deities that were described as sparks of Ahura Mazda, and they got on with the messy business of building the world and sort of things that Ahura Mazda was above, getting his hands dirty on that kind of thing. And Zoroastrianism, the whole creed of the religion, is summed up in 6 words, which is good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And that's the core belief of every Zoroastrian. In Egypt, Akhenaten didn't do Holy Scripture. There was no such thing as the Word of God, because God was way beyond words and stuff like that. But he changed Egyptian art, and the more realistic depictions, and the first time the pharaoh was depicted with his wife, with his children, kissing, cuddling, hugging. And this was because Zoroaster wanted to manifest in the art the love that was coming from Aten, because it was a god. Aten is a god of love, and also a god that's beyond male, female, or is both. He also had a distaste for violence and conquest, and some of the Egyptian empire was lost under his reign because he'd get pleading letters from his minions who were running foreign territory saying, send us troops to put down the insurrection. He just ignored them. And and Aten, who sort of built himself with light, as I was described, is continually creating the world by means of light. And this was Akhenaten's firm belief that everything began with light. And in fact, it wasn't until Einstein came along that anybody else would dabble, look at light in a vaguely similar way. The Persian Empire, which was firmly Zoroastrian, flourished across an area larger than the Roman Empire, and it came before the Roman Empire. And when Zoroastrian Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon in 539 BC, he penned the first known Charter of Human Rights. That's it there, the actual charter that he, I guess I use the term, wrote. But in this, slavery was abolished. And he sort of said slavery should be, such a tradition should be exterminated the world over. He guaranteed freedom of religion to everybody. And you couldn't be found guilty of a crime because your father or your mother or your child or your husband had committed it. And he also had this sort of guarantee here. He said, this is until means, while I am the monarch, I'll never let anyone take, where was this? Well, somewhere maybe another one, he says that if you don't like me, you can chuck me out, and I won't use force of arms to come back. But he was so much better than whoever he chucked out that people tended to be happy being part of this rule. So that's 539 BC, abolishing slavery. The subsequent Roman Empire was built on slavery, and it was over 2,000 years before we got rid of slavery in Europe and North America. So he was a bit ahead of his time. Now, Akhenaten died after 17 years of rule. He didn't have a successor. He didn't have people he trained up. He saw himself as the interpreter of Aten. He didn't have an infrastructure. And the priests, because it was, as we've heard throughout this festival, religion was pretty important to Egypt, and there was a lot of traditions. And he had sought to get rid of all that and say, you know, there's just one simple God. You don't have to go to specific temples and have priests and all that. But the priests reestablished the status quo within 5 or 10 years of his death. The temples to Aten were dismantled and used to rebuild temples to Amun, who he had banished. So though he changed the culture of Egypt, his innovative religion of light was completely undiscovered till the latter part of the 19th century, that people started to realize this guy had existed and what he'd taught. And Sigmund Freud and a few others suggested that Akhenaten may have laid the groundwork for Moses to come on the scene, because it was also this monotheistic God, a God of light, but this God had made light. You know, let there be light, and suddenly it sprang into existence. And he was definitely a man, and he did have conversations, you know, with people like Moses and the other prophets. And also he was a jealous God. He was vindictive and spiteful if you didn't do what he told you to do. And I guess people could get their head around that and identify with this God more than they could just pure light. But that's a whole other story, and let's get back on track here. And poor Akhenaten, I think he'd be horrified if anybody thought they were connecting Moses to have been inspired by him. So why didn't Zoroastrian thrive and prevail? It's a beautiful religion, but you know, as we know, the victorious do not always have God on their side or even righteousness. It's often just better generals. And the Zoroastrians suffered terribly at the hands of Alexander the Accursed, as they called him. He just really tore their culture apart, destroyed a lot of their legacy, and then subsequently by the Mongols at the turn of the millennium. And then when Islam moved in the 8th century, that was the last straw, and they sought refuge in Gujarat, India. And the refuge was only given to them on the basis that they do not proselytize. So you can't convert to Zoroastrianism. You can only be born into it, and they're not fast breeders. So most Zoroastrians are still in India, and there's about 250,000 or less of them today. There are some nice Zoroastrian children on the New Year celebration in Mumbai. 2009, if you can't read the bottom of the screen or care. So Parsi, they're called Parsi Zoroastrians based on their Persian origins, and they're known for their goodness, their honesty, their reliability, and their devotion to doing work that will benefit their fellow man and woman. They open libraries, schools, swimming pools, subway systems. That's what Zoroastrians do. And this is from an ancient religion worshiping light, and it's just, I think, you know, when you connect directly to the light, it brings these things in. You know, you can call it a wild theory if you like, but I like it. Now, recognition of our sun, as I was saying earlier, was, as a divine entity, was common wherever you went on the planet. And on a timely note, one of those pagan things, the Olympics, they would always light the Olympic flame from the sun with a parabolic mirror called a scaphia, because this ensured the divinity and the purity of the flame that began the Olympic Games. And it was central to a spiritual culture of the civilized and educated pre-Christian world that we've been hearing today. And I reiterate, it wasn't science, but the church. The church was such a jealous suppressor of sun worship that they declared sun worship to be the most heinous crime you could do. It was worse than rape, robbery, or murder. And it's hard for us to realize that how society could have been like that today. But Nick Marsh yesterday was mentioning Giordano Bruno, is one of my heroes as well. But he was the first man to recognize that our sun was another star, and that we were just a star in the sky, and that the universe was. He declared the universe to be infinite with an infinite number of stars, and he saw stars as living divine beings. And the church did not like this. He spent 7 years in the dungeons, and he appeared before the Inquisition. He refused to recant, and he was burned at the stake in 1600. Galileo did recant, and he just got a lifetime of house arrest. Then, even in the 19th century, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe waited until 1832 when he was nearly at his deathbed, and in his last conversation he had with his most trusted assistant, he felt safe to say that he was prepared to revere the sun, which is likewise a manifestation of the highest being, and indeed the most powerful which we, the children of the earth, are allowed to behold. 30 years later, when William Turner, the great British landscape artist, was on his deathbed, and he was called the painter of light because he used to stare for hours into the sun, early sun gazer. But even for all his fame, he didn't dare discuss his beliefs with anyone until he was on his deathbed, when his final words were, "The sun is God." Well, nobody could penalize him for saying such an outrageous thing at that point. But I can, today, I mean, it's the first time in centuries that you can give a talk like this. You can talk about stellar consciousness or divine light of non-biblical variety and not end up in deep doo-doo for doing so. And who knows how long this window will remain open, because fundamentalism is on the increase around the world, Christian and Muslim. So I'm going to leap in here, grab this window of opportunity, and do it all in honor of Giordano Bruno and all these people who've been incinerated, incarcerated, or attacked over centuries of darkness because of their spiritual beliefs. But I'm no stranger to new ideas or the ridicule that they can sometimes attract. And back in 1967, my brother and I were the first to introduce natural and organic foods to the marketplace. Okay. But we'd be talking to people and telling them that what they ate affected their health. And we'd get, who is this nutter, you are what you eat, hippy-dippy bollocks, And, but we showed them. And over the years, the restaurant developed into a couple of shops, a magazine, wholemeal bakeries, manufacturing, wholesale, and it got quite big. It got into a big enterprise. We're selling hundreds of tons of stuff a week out of here. But then, it got this big. It was kind of doing my head in, running all of that stuff. So I managed to cut out and introduced a new company, a virtual company, and introduced a brand new product to the market that I christened the Veggie Burger. And it entered the language years later, that word. But even my friends and associates in the natural food industry thought, you can't do this, Gregory. You can't have a one-product company and Veggie Burger. What's the market? There's no market for this, And I said, well, make a market. So it caught on. And I sold it, and I had a sort of 2-year advance installment on my retirement, which was a lot of fun. But then this bloody New Zealand artist, Harry Cook, gave me a copy of the book on chaos theory by James Gleick. And that sort of changed my life. And I decided I had to open up a shop dedicated to chaos theory. Thank you, Harry Cook. And that was called Strange Attractions. And we had all sorts of anything to do with chaos theory, books, toys, and then lots of fractal designed posters, T-shirts, jigsaw puzzles. You imagine a fractal jigsaw puzzle, wicked. But even then, I would go to poster companies to publish and say, hey, when I was beginning, I said, would you like to try some of these designs? And they, no, we've never seen that on a poster. What are you talking about? You know, they looked like it was crazy. But then a couple of years later, I sort of went to the shows, and they bit my arm off for licensing poster designs. So that was fun. But then, for me, the whole thing with chaos theory was its relevance to how we run our society. And I had to write a book about it, actually, arguing that bottom-up organization within society is so much more positive and effective than top-down control using coercion as the weapon. You know, however noble the desires, it's always do this or we're going to damage you somehow. And you just don't get results like that. And you do with freedom, which is what this book is about. And again, it sounded a little bit crazy at the time, but now there's been a few economic crises and unnecessary wars, and people are starting to get the idea that top-down control is not necessarily the answer to our problems. Now, my last book, Son of God, you know, that's talking about the sun being alive. You know, that's about as woo-woo as you get. And I got some really funny looks from people saying, oh, what is it you write about? And I tell them. But again, that idea seems to be seeping through. And it's just the biggest elephant in the room. I'm just flabbergasted. When I took my book into the Atlantis occult bookshop in London, the manager was thrilled, because she said, we've got this many books on the moon, and we haven't got any on the sun. So, you know, understanding that the sun is a living being opens us up to so many other realizations. And one of those is about light, which is what I'm talking about today. And I've got a chapter in the book on light, which is titled In the Light of Intelligence, on the Intelligence in Light. And so we're going to now imagine you're Akhenaten or Zoroaster, and you're listening to all this stuff about the God that you've identified and revere. And we will, as do scientists, look at light in all the vibrations of the electromagnetic spectrum, not just a little bit that our eyes are tuned in to absorb, but in all of its vibrations. But first of all, we won't get scientific. What have I got next here? Yes, things coming up. We'll sort of look at light, our linguistic body language, how we use light in our language, because that's quite revealing. And it seems to be implying intelligence, knowledge, inspiration, and association with positive, good things. So, you know, when we understand a concept or situation, we see the light. And it's often because somebody's been shedding light on the situation. And when somebody's inspired, they're all lit up. And we talk about seeing the light in somebody's eyes. And we use terms like in light of what you've said, and in the light of experience to indicate knowledge that we've gained. When we're on a good path, we might be following a guiding light. When we find true love, we've met the light of our life. And when we leave this body, the lights go out. And when we're really, you know, charged, we're all fired up. And then the peak of spiritual experience, the state of total comprehension, is enlightenment. Filled, embodying part of the light. And then a good person, somebody with special talent, who's not putting it out, might be hiding their light under a bushel. We emerge from dark times and we see the light of day or the light at the end of the tunnel. And when we finally get something, we're illuminated on it at last. And we love being delighted. I mean, whoa, delighted with this. Intelligent people are called bright. Great ideas, thoughts, and beauty can be termed dazzling. Smart people are brilliant. And I expect this is not just in the English language. And so we use light for intelligent, positive, spiritual meaning. And the bad guys are always the forces of darkness. Now, we've advanced our knowledge of light enormously since Isaac Newton first split it apart with a prism and understood the mechanics of the rainbow. But the more that we discover about light, the more mysterious it becomes. It's not like, oh yeah, we've cracked that one. It's just, my God. So we'll get a little bit into some of that now, because as Akhenaten and Zoroaster realized millennia ago, light manifests the creative force of the universe. And today we have there are four forces in the universe. It's a terrible illustration, but they're invisible things. It's the only one I could find. We've got the weak force and the strong force, which are confined to the atomic level, hold atoms together and help hold nuclei together and help things decay. Then we have gravity, which is a strange occult force understood by the alchemist Isaac Newton, and as Nick was speaking about him yesterday, I suspect that the reason that Isaac Newton unlocked the secrets of the mechanics of matter was because he spent so much time studying its spirit beforehand, more time. That wasn't going to be in the lecture, so and then the final, and gravity may not even exist. It might be curvature in space-time, according to Einstein.
Sorry to interrupt. Every time you touch the computer, you get feedback.
The computer?
You're transmitting electricity.
When I do that?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to do.
That's all right. Just if you rest your hand on it, it transmits.
Oh, rest my hand on it. Okay. It's 2 minutes penalty time I get at the end of this. I forgot to take this out. There you go. So the fourth force is electromagnetism, which is the power source of the universe. It's what holds matter together, and is what gives it the appearance of being solid, and it spans galaxies. So, this is an energetic thing, invisible, without substance, and this is what it is. There's no health and safety here, are there, at the moment? And this is starlight. This is the light of our local star, which has been stored in the wood, and it's being recycled and reborn as light. And when it's done, you've just got the ashes. So when any fire is done, the ashes is what came out of the ground, and everything else was air, water, and starlight, sunlight. And that's through photosynthesis, I mentioned earlier. That's how the vegetable world is made. And photosynthesis, synthesis photo, made by light. And I mean, without light acting on that, we have Perrier, we have clouds, we have surf on the side of the ocean, but it's magical stuff. And it's not only the magical building brick of life, as I said, it's the power source of all life on Earth. We are recycling starlight, and maybe that's where the light in the eyes comes from. In the picture, we describe the light in the eyes. Well, it is. It's light being re-expressed as life. And of course, when you're not staring at the source of the light, it's totally invisible. And you've got, there's the photosynthesis. Okay, get that all in. And boom, and I'm putting my finger on the computer. Bad boy. So when you're not staring at the source of light, it's invisible, because the night sky is black until that illumination hits the moon or Jupiter or Venus, and then you can see, oh yeah, there's light out there. So it's crazy stuff, and it tells us most of what we know about the world around us. And I mean, just the information that's coming through that little hole in the center of your eye, the depth, the perspective, you're getting so much through there, and we have this sort of mechanical explanation that the photon hits the brick is red, it leaves all the colors of the white light with the brick, and then comes to your eye carrying the red light, so that's why the brick looks red. But it's telling us so much more about depth and texture and what's around you. And another way of looking at it is that the light is sharing its information with you. It's coming in there and saying, hey, Greg, this is what's out there, catch a load of this. Swedish cinematographer Sven Nykvist, who worked with Ingmar Bergman. This is what he said about light. He said, light can be gentle, dangerous, dreamlike, bare, living, dead, misty, clear, hot, dark, violet, spring-like, falling, straight, sensual, limited, poisonous, calm, and soft. There's all these sort of qualities that you get with life, with light, and the good old vibration that, lifts our spirits when we're out in it. And instead, we're being taught to fear light today. It's all this, put creams on yourself and wear special glasses to protect you from this guy whose character has been our friend for a million years. I think Akhenaten and Zoroaster wouldn't be happy with that situation. And then information. Okay, we see the world around us, but light is such an incredible carrier of information. And we could sort of tend to think the only practical purpose this is put to is when we use it to send radio signals and TV signals out, to speak on our cell phones, or, the information that's coming into our smartphones is incredible, and that's all carried by photons through Wi-Fi networks, which are powered by photons. And we've used them for X-rays and for MRI scans. They're just so incredibly able to carry information. And we know that bacteria and plants communicate with light. We know that the cells in our bodies communicate with light. We've got neurons in our brain emitting light. It seems fundamental to so many forms of information transfer, as well as sound, which is also an invisible vibration, but sound needs space and it's short-termed. Oh my God. Okay, well, so we've got the electromagnetic field spanning our galaxy. They span galaxy to galaxy. Perhaps they're sharing information as well in an amazing network there. I have to make this quickly. And also, light, when you're traveling at the speed of light, you're outside of time. You're not, we go forward in time, you go faster than the speed of light, you go backwards in time. At the speed of light, you don't experience time. So it's all going, everything's happening at once for a photon, even though it might be sequential. And when you get people coming back from near-death experiences, they talk about their light flashing before them in an instant. But it's a sequential instant, and they're beings of light at the time, so outside of time. It also doesn't need space, because it's just a vibration. It doesn't actually need, it doesn't have any substance, it doesn't need to be any place. And if you're looking at Sirius, the photons that have traveled from Sirius, 1,000 a second or so, coming into your eyeball, into you, have been traveling for 8.5 years across 81 trillion miles of space without stopping for petrol on the way. And they lose none of their power on that whole trip. And if you comment into a photon on that, they say, well, of course, we just got there. Space doesn't really exist for it. It's hard to get our head around that. But if there was something before the Big Bang, if there was a Big Bang, what came first, energy or matter? Energy is the only thing it could be. Oh God, I was going to go on about E equals mc squared and the energy of divine light enjoying itself in physical form because matter is condensed vibration. So there we have. So goodness me. Well, we'll skip these photos. And there's so much. There's double slit experiments, there's co-entanglement, there's waves, it's wave or particle, so many mysteries. But as a recap, Akhenaten, Zoroaster, told us the nature of light was beyond our comprehension, and most quantum physicists would agree with that. Our language tells us about light. It's the agent of the electromagnetic force, fundamental powerhouse of the cosmos. Light's invisible, yet tells us about the world around us. It brings substance and form to the vegetable world, yet has none itself, no substance. Life on Earth is powered by the light of our local star. Light exists out of time. Without substance, it doesn't need space. So I ask you, what sort of status would you give to a universal force that embodies all of those characters? And I'll leave you to answer that. And that's all. Thank you very much. They live in communities, stars do, called clusters of hundreds, thousands, or around 10 million or more stars. And like we live in villages, towns, and cities. And within the clusters, they live as couples, as these romantic astronomers call it a binary system. But it's two stars that orbit around each other as they travel through the galaxy, sometimes exchanging gases in the process, I'm told. So they're also, stars are connected to each other by electromagnetic fields. Throughout the galaxy, these stars are hooked up to each other by electromagnetic fields. And it seems that, I would suspect there's function to these. It's not some accidental thing going on. And if scientists were to abandon their long-standing taboo against considering consciousness to exist in anything besides human beings, and some now say dolphins and orangutans too, but if they looked into the consciousness of living stars, they would perhaps not need these curious fixes like dark matter to try and explain why a galaxy holds together like it might be a conscious living organism, put to this silly idea. But it wasn't science that made us think sun worship was primitive or ignorant. It was the church that absolutely burned that into our culture. They took a dim view of sun worship, as we know. So unlike the ancients, we now view the sun as just a dead ball of gas up there that happens to provide us with the light of life. But science has a lot to say about the sun, and when you look at the scientific information on the sun, it underscores what the ancients felt about the sun. So unlike the ancients, we know that the sun and other stars turn hydrogen and helium gas into all the elements of the periodic table that enable us and this world to be here. So they're creating matter out of those simple ingredients. Unlike the ancients, we know about the sun's key role in photosynthesis, how sunlight takes water and air and turns them into the entire vegetable world, which is a pretty amazing phenomenon. We also know that the very energy of our life is recycled starlight, which has been condensed in plants, and that is re-released in us as life. So is it really that strange to think that the source of the materials and the energy of life might know life itself? We also know the sun's a really complex ball of hot gas. It's got 7 distinct layers to it. They're all providing very different functions within the sun, and there's a hive of electromagnetic activity going on the surface and within the sun. We also know, because there's 4 or more satellites looking at the sun now, that these enigmatic features of the sun, the sunspots, solar flares, coronal filaments, and coronal mass ejections, scientists say well, first of all, they are all highly synchronized. It's a coordinated activity going on, and scientists maintain, or they suggest, that the sun's corona is responsible for these. The sun's corona being the electromagnetic field of the sun that takes up more space than the sun itself. So they say the corona is responsible for these features. When you ask them to tell you about the corona, they say the corona is the most mysterious feature of the sun itself. And it's curious that if you talk to scientists about consciousness and mind in us, they say it's the most mysterious feature of the human condition. So you can put two and two together, but I suspect that the corona of the sun is its mind field. We also know NASA discovered 4 years ago a magnetic portal that connects the Earth's electromagnetic field to the sun's corona. It's the diameter of the Earth, and it's a connection that joins up every 8 minutes. And I've got the slides here, don't I? Excuse me. These are all those people that used to worship the sun in different cultures, and I'll just use my hands. There's the sun. That's the 7 different layers of the sun. And these are the magnetic portals. Okay, so we're online with pictures now. So yeah. Now, does that connection, does that sound like a dumb ball of gas just acting according to gravity and physical principles? I don't know why the scientists don't get it, probably because they'd lose their jobs if they did. We also know that all stars, the ancients didn't even know that our sun, most of them didn't know that our sun was another star, or that stars were like our sun. But we do, and we know that stars each have their own individual, astronomers use the term song, this sort of signal that they send out. And my talk is titled Stardust and Stellar Consciousness, which is a talk I've been giving for a year or two based on my book, Son of God. But I've also been working on a new talk for this year. I didn't think I'd have it ready when Lucy invited me to give a talk at her premiere edition of the Eternal Knowledge Festival. But I have got a new talk, so I'm going to premiere it today, but lest the Trade Descriptions Act people send me a nasty letter, I'm going to give you a 5-minute condensation of stardust and stellar consciousness. So, really quick, you'll have to put some of this together yourself as I go, but the default mode for humanity was always to recognize our sun as an entity with divine status. And it didn't matter what continent you went to, what century you picked, what culture, this was it. The Greeks, the Mayans, the Egyptians, the Celts, everybody knew this, and it was when Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, that's when a stop was